All right, welcome everybody to this month's webinar for busy lawyers. We are so delighted to bring you these webinars. They are short, 20 to 30 minutes long, and they're designed to give you information that you can take back right away to your office and put into use. And today, I feel really lucky to have the pleasure of introducing Niki Black. Niki is a Rochester, New York author, journalist, and attorney, and the legal technology evangelist at MyCase, the legal practice management software for small firms. She is the nationally recognized author of Cloud Computing for Lawyers and co-authors Social Media for Lawyers, The Next Frontier, both published by the American Bar Association. She also co-authors Criminal Law in New York, a Thomson Reuters treatise. She writes regular columns for Above the Law, ABA Journal, and the Daily Record. And she has authored hundreds of articles for other publications as well, and she regularly speaks at conferences regarding the intersection of law and emerging technologies. She is an ABA legal rebel and is listed on the Fast Case 50 and the ABA LTRC Women in Legal Tech. If you want to contact her directly, she can be reached at niki@mycase.com. Now, before I turn it over to Niki, I just want to let you know that we're going to have plenty of time at the end of her presentation to take all of your questions. So just write them into the chat box. And then at the end of her presentation, I'm going to relay them all back to Niki and she'll answer all of them. So, Niki, take it away.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. My name is Niki Black, as she said. Today I'm going to talk to you about the top technology tools you can use to streamline your practice. Essentially, I'm just going to go over a couple of different categories of web-based tools and online tools that lawyers can use, and a vast array of different ways you can use those tools, whether it's standalone or built into other different software programs. So to start off with, I am, okay, sorry about that. To start off with, I want to take a trip back to 1995 really quickly, just to set the stage. So in 1995, I set the stage in terms of how we got here technologically. So in 1995, I just graduated from law school, and I was a complete and total geek. And I'm not sure if there are any other Trekkies out there, but Star Trek: The Next Generation was what got me through law school. It was my escape. And when I watched Star Trek: The Next Generation, what truly was so interesting to me about the show was that there were all these technologies that I truly didn't think would ever be available in my lifetime. So there were touchscreen computer interfaces, voice-enabled computer interfaces, some tricorders that you could carry around in your pocket that had all the world's information and told you everything you needed to know about your surroundings. There was video conferencing. There were replicators that brought you food and other objects that you needed instantly. And all of these tools and technologies were so fascinating to me. And I just hoped that at some point, at least one of them might be available in my future. But I really didn't think that it was possible, because it was 1995. And the internet was just on the verge of becoming known to the public. And in 1995, Clifford Stahl wrote a book called Silicon Valley Snake Oil. And he was an astronomer at and he asserted in that book and in this correlating article, the Internet Ba, that he wrote for Newsweek, that the internet was simply a bunch of snake oil, and that all of these dreams and possibilities that everybody foresaw for the internet and its effect upon our culture were just a bunch of doohickey, essentially. And so here's just a couple of quotes from his article from Newsweek. Visionaries say commerce and business will shift from offices and malls to networks and modems. Baloney. They predict that we'll soon buy books and newspapers straight over the internet. Sure. Do our computer pundits lack all common sense? The truth is, no online database will replace your daily newspaper. And he has since admitted he was completely incorrect. And as we sit here today in 2019, all of those things are part of our day-to-day life. And then turning back to Star Trek, all of those technologies in Star Trek that I mentioned are now readily available. And a lot of these things, 2007 was the next pivotal moment in my mind. Twitter rolled out. Facebook had been rolled out to the public right before that, the year before that. Amazon EC2, which is Amazon's cloud computing server, the cloud computing program was just rolling out in 2007. The iPhone was introduced in 2007. And since then, we now have in our pocket these mini computers. We have 3D printing, which is a lot like a replicator. We have voice interface computers, touchscreen computers. We have video conferencing. We have the ability to do all of these things in that short span of a little over 20 years, but really since 2007. The internet was the first big thing. And then in 2007, mobile, cloud computing, and social media became these three forces that changed our world. Today, I'm going to focus on the cloud computing and mobile computing aspect a little bit. And what's so important about cloud and mobile computing is that mobile devices are constrained by their memory, processing power, and battery life. But when combined with cloud computing, data processing and storage can happen off of those devices. And why this is so important is because without cloud computing, mobile devices would be useless. And a lot of the tools I'm going to talk about today are mobile apps, and others are software apps. But none of it would be possible if all of this processing and storage was happening off of your phone, because your phone's, what makes your phone so valuable is that it's small, but that limits its processing and storage capacities. And when your phone and the cloud together, they create sort of limitless possibilities that give us access to all of this information and all of these programs that make our day-to-day lives so much easier. So let's talk about some of these different ways that you can use technology to streamline your law firm, your day-to-day practice, and increase your productivity. First of all, billing time. And I want to note at the bottom of this and a couple of other of the pages where I go into different categories. I write some ABA journal articles that address each of these. And so if you go to that URL, you'll find one of my articles. And I write ABA journal articles on different categories of software and technology tools. And I wrote a series of articles on time tracking, invoicing, and payment processing tools for lawyers. And you can access some of them at that link, but there's a series of 3 different articles. So you definitely want to take a look at that for a really in-depth view of those 3 different types of software, but I'm going to give you a quick overview here. So when it comes to billing on the go, there's lots of different tools that will help you do this. And so first of all, in terms of time tracking, and that's what I'm really going to focus on here in terms of the different tools that are available. As attorneys, we oftentimes bill our time on an hourly basis. And it used to be when I was an associate in a law firm in the early 2000s, I had a paper timesheet, and a lot of lawyers still use paper timesheets. And what would happen is I would track my time, and at the end of the day, I would often be faced with a timesheet with a couple of time entries, knowing that there was, and sometimes even a blank timesheet, although I tried to avoid that. But having to recreate my time at the end of the day. I knew I'd been busy all day, but I hadn't tracked all of my time and written it down as I went, oftentimes because I wasn't at my desk when I was doing some of the work. So that's where 21st century time tracking comes in. You can track your time on the go, which means you can take your smartphone or your tablet, and as long as you have an internet connection or a data connection, you can enter your billable time. And so when you go into the courthouse, you appear on an argument for a case. While you're waiting for the case to be called, you look at a few emails. When you're leaving, you run into opposing counsel for another case and have a quick conversation with that person. And then when you stand on the courthouse steps, you can enter all of that billable time in your phone. So you can enter your billable time for each of those different activities. And it can, depending on the software you're using, it's either simply listed when you go back to access it later, or it's actually associated with those cases in your law firm system. And you have a bunch of different options when it comes to time tracking. And and at the end of the day, your end goal is to enter your billable time one way or another on your smartphone and also on your computer. A lot of these also have computer-based time tracking as well. So the first thing you can do is you can use a legal app that is web-based. You can use an app that is specifically for lawyers that is web-based, meaning it's a cloud computing application. And there are standalone tools and there are web-based. There are tools that integrate with law practice management systems. So in terms of its standalone tool that a lot of lawyers use that wasn't created for lawyers, but a lot of lawyers use it now and it has features for lawyers, is Time 59. Bill for Time is another time tracking tool that has started to add additional features into it to make it a more robust system that isn't just for billing and invoicing and time tracking. And then there's law practice management apps. And the law practice management apps have built-in time tracking, invoicing, and payment processing tools. And you'll find that the vast majority of law practice management software that's cloud-based provides all of these different types of tools to you. If you use a standalone like Time 59 that is not part of your law practice management system, at the end of the day, you're going to get a list of the billable time, and then you're going to have to, one way or another, get it into your system. When you use Bill for Time or some of the law practice management apps, those will often automatically associate with the particular matters in your system. And so when you go to look at the invoice, you're going to see that those time entries automatically associated that you can then edit and send the invoice out through the system to the client. And oftentimes the systems will also allow the ability for the client to pay you through a credit card, through a payment processing app via credit card or debit card. So those are the legal apps that are web-based. A legal app that is server-based for some of the larger firms or firms that already have a billing system that's server-based, there's iTimekeep. And what that does is it creates an interface between your firm's billing system and the time tracking tool so that you can enter the time through iTimekeep as you're out and about, enter your billable time on your phone, and then iTimekeep communicates with your firm's server-based billing system, and the information's input that way. Then there's non-legal apps. Like one example is TimeWorks Pro. Those allow you to enter billable time, and then you get a sheet that has all of it listed, which you then have to input one way or another and associate it with the cases into whatever systems that you're using. I typically recommend that lawyers consider web-based tools and apps that are specifically designed for lawyers if they're available, because they're going to have a better, the developer's sense of your ethical obligations, your security needs, and your day-to-day work needs and workflow. But at the end of the day, it's ultimately your decision depending on your firm's needs. And again, there's time tracking, then there's invoicing, and then there's the payment processing. And I mostly focus on the time tracking here, but those articles go into all three. Then there's one thing that's really important is secure communication. Again, I wrote an article on this, an ABA journal article. You can see the URL on the bottom. And the reason I want to talk a little bit about secure communication is because the ABA issued in 2017 Opinion 477. And what 477 said was that this ethics opinion talked about lawyers' obligation to communicate securely with clients. And in the late 90s, the ABA and all the other jurisdictions ultimately said, lawyers can use email until the technology changes, but at this point, we're giving you the green light to use email. And what the ABA said in Opinion 477 in 2017 is that the technology's changed and things are a little bit different now, and there are more secure options for communication. And on a case-by-case basis, you need to consider whether unencrypted email is sufficient for your communications in a specific case in terms of the sensitivity of the information you're going to be sharing. Because email is inherently unsecure, it's unencrypted, and anyone with an intent to do so can easily hack into emails as they travel from one server to the next to their ultimate destination. So that's why the ABA says, on a case-by-case basis, you need to assess the sensitivity of the information you're going to be discussing, and in some situations, you may want to use alternatives to unencrypted email. Those alternatives are encrypted email or secure online portals for the most part. So there's also secure texting apps and that type of thing as well, but I'm going to focus on email because that's how most lawyers share substantive information with their clients. There are encrypted email apps. Those are more secure, and both parties have to be part of that encrypted email situation. So they have to use, both have that software installed so that they can then send encrypted emails to each other. And then there's secure online portals, and those are incredibly secure because everything is protected, confined to the platform, encrypted. So what with secure online portals, which are often built into law practice management platforms, but they don't have to be. Other platforms and systems will have them as well. What that allows you to do is you let your client know at the beginning of the case that this is how you're planning to communicate. And in that case, you can, throughout the case, you're going to be communicating through this portal. So your client signs into the system, gets a password, sets up their login. And from that point on, all messaging and communication about the case occurs in that software program through that secure encrypted portal. And it's all in one location so that you can track the conversation, you can share and collaborate on documents, which I'll talk about in a minute. But all that information is in one place. And what I recommend in light of Opinion 477, which is advisory, but it's a sign of the times to all the different jurisdictions, is that rather than on a case-by-case basis assess the sensitivity of your information, find some secure method that's encrypted to communicate for all of your cases up front. That way you don't have to do this whole song and dance at the beginning of each case or even at the beginning of each situation where you're sharing information with your client. So I suggest you take a look at that article I cited previously, and I'll go back to that real quick so you can get the URL. And I list a bunch of different options there, and it goes a little more in depth. But I would suggest that you consider finding some secure way to communicate with your clients, since it's definitely coming down the pike. And at the end of the day, it's going to make your life a lot easier to have one system in place rather than doing it on a case-by-case basis. Next up, collaboration tools. And what a collaboration tools allow you to do is collaborate with your clients, co-counsel, to collaborate internally on a case with other members of your firm and other people working on the case. And these collaboration tools, depending on the features built into them, will allow you to collaborate on documents, communicate about cases, edit and annotate documents, share different versions of documents all in one place. So rather than having those long convoluted email chains where you're sending different versions of documents back and forth and you can easily lose track of the version of the document and you're again sending them through not exactly secure channels, you can collaborate in one secure place and everything's all in one place and easily tracked. There's a bunch of different options. I've listed some of them here. Google Documents is one option. And these are free. Trello and Slack are other options, and there's free versions available for all of those. But I typically recommend that lawyers consider paid versions. Not only are you getting more robust feature sets, you're also getting much better customer service and arguably better security depending on the particular tool that you're using. So I would recommend that if you want to dip your toes in it, you may read just to get a sense of which one's going to work best for your firm. Either try the free versions or the free trials of some of the paid versions. But at the end of the day, you're going to want to invest in a paid version. And some of the paid versions are Box.net and Dropbox. Law practice management systems, Glass Cubes I mentioned because my co-author for my social media book, Carolyn Elephant, and I used Glass Cubes to collaborate when we wrote that Social Media for Lawyers book. So I like to mention that because it's one that I used pretty extensively that's still around, even though the book was written in 2009, give or take, and published in 2010. But so I definitely, and at the end of the day, if you're using law ones designed for legal, oftentimes that's a better choice. But Dropbox and Box.net in recent years have added features that are intended to meet a lot of lawyers' needs and other professionals. So at this point, they're definitely managing to keep up with the keep up to date and with meeting the needs of people that have specific needs. But at the end of the day, you really do need to make sure that you ask the provider, ask them a whole range of security questions, which is outside the scope of this particular talk. But you need to vet them and make sure that they do have features built in terms of security that are going to meet your law firm's needs depending on the types of information that you're handling. Next up, document storage. And again, I wrote about that for an ABA article. And there, in terms of document management and document storage tools, there's a link right there at the bottom of this page where you can read an article that really goes in depth into all of your different options. And with document storage, a lot of the collaboration tools have an overlap because good document storage programs oftentimes have collaboration features built in. The reason you want to have document storage in the cloud, which is what all of these options are that I have listed, is because it gives you that disaster backup. So if something happens to your physical office and your physical files, you have this offline backup. Or your servers in your office, if you choose to have on-site storage and off-site storage, you have a backup plan in place, both for your malpractice and also just for practical reasons, so that you can continue practicing if there's an earthquake or a flood or a fire in your law firm, for example. And you can store your law firm's documents in a number of different places. There's law practice management platforms. Those are encrypted by the company, and I do want to mention this, and they're designed for lawyers. Encrypted by the company means that the company encrypts it, but they also hold the encryption keys. And so if they, depending on the type of information that your firm handles, if your firm handles information that you think might be subject to a government subpoena or warrant, especially like the FISA warrants, you may want to consider the third category on this page that I'm going to go into in a minute, because you'll want to hold those encryption keys, because with some of the different types of warrants the government can serve, your cloud provider won't even be permitted to tell you that the data has been accessed by the government due to the operation of the laws. It's considered treason, and they can get in incredible amounts of trouble. So if your firm does handle particularly sensitive matters, which is the minority of firms, you may want to hold the encryption key yourself. And I'll talk about that in 1 second. But in most cases, law practice management platforms and Dropbox and Box will work for most law firms. The companies hold the encryption keys, you don't, but it's encrypted on their end, and encrypted in transit is another important thing. And you want to make sure that you understand how they do handle your data, who has access to it, and under what situations that they'll inform you whether the government does ask for it. So you do want to get that information up front, but these different tools allow you to store your data in the cloud, have backup, and easily access it from different devices depending on how the platforms and software is set up. Then I just want to talk about end-to-end encryption, where you hold the encryption key. SpiderOak and BoxCryptor are two examples. BoxCryptor is an add-on for Dropbox. SpiderOak is another company that provides that. And essentially what that means is that you hold the encryption key. So the only way that the government can get access to that data is if they come to you for the encryption key. The provider will basically have to say, sorry, we can't access it, we don't hold the key. So that's just something to keep in mind depending on the types of documents and the nature of the data that your firm's storing. And then document scanning. I'll go over these quickly because I don't want to use up too much of the time. I wrote an article on scanning. You can see that in the URL there. I'll give you a minute to jot that down if you'd like. And these are just some scanning tools that allow you to scan on the go or easily scan your paper documents to turn them into digital documents so that you can file them with the court, store them in your online storage, and access them remotely from your smartphone or wherever you happen to be, from any computer. So some scanning tools are iOS apps. I like Scanner Pro. I use that one. Genius Scan and TurboScan are also similar. These allow you to take photos of your documents with your phone, and it converts it to a PDF. And then you have any number of options in terms of sharing or storing those documents. So you can easily, or even copy them. So you can take a picture of something and then create a paper document if you need it. But so they give you all sorts of options. They're very reasonably priced, usually just a couple dollars a piece. And it's great for easy scanning on the go and sharing documents on the go, and then getting them into your system easily. Then there's hardware. When solo and small firm lawyers need scanners, these are some of the best options that are often talked about. The Fujitsu ScanSnap is the one that most solo and small firm lawyers really like the most. It's supposed to be one of the best scanners out there. It comes highly recommended. But these are just some other options of portable scanners. And in my article, I also talk about mobile scanners. You can also have, it's a more robust scanner than the iOS apps, but it's smaller and portable. And so you can quickly scan a number of documents in a row on the go and just keep it in your car if you need to. So those are some scanning tools to consider. And then last but not least, PDF annotation. This is a really, as soon as the iPad came out, I saw the potential in this. PDF annotation gives you the ability, especially if you commute a lot to work, to take a look at documents while you're on the subway for your commute or on the train and edit them. So if letters came in the day before, or you need to review a motion or a memo that you wrote, you can review it and edit it highlight it, leave comments on the side of it, using your iPhone or your smartphone or your iPad or other tablet. And it allows you to annotate and even add voice memos. So it's great to try to pull a document together to send off to your administrative assistant to put into Final. So these are some great tools, super convenient. There's iOS apps. Some examples are PDF Expert is the one that I prefer and that I've used oftentimes. Goodreader, I annotate, Docs. There's web-based software that you can use on your computer typically, but you can also use it on your devices. PDF Escape and PDF Online Reader. And then there's desktop software like Adobe Acrobat's the gold standard. Foxit and Ocular are other options. And a lot of them oftentimes have online versions as well these days. So those are some options in terms of PDF viewing and annotation as well. And then I'm going to leave time for questions in a minute, but I would just, hearkening back to my Star Trek reference, a lot of lawyers are a little put off with the idea of trying to research all these tools and learn about them and implement them in their practice. But at the end of the day, I would suggest that, as Garrick from Star Trek Deep Space Nine said, the truth is usually just an excuse for a lack of imagination. He meant it differently than I do. But I think at the end of the day, and I'll leave you with this story before I take some questions, but all lawyers in most jurisdictions have a duty to maintain tech competence. And at the end of the day, the more you learn about technology on a day-to-day basis, the easier it's going to be to stay on top of these changes and understand them and make educated decisions about using tech in your practice. And so with that, I'm just going to end with a short story to drive that point home. I have some teenage daughters. When one of them was about 8 or 9 years old, she played soccer. And I use the word played loosely because she kind of ran around out there on the field as 8-year-olds tend to do. And one day she ran up to me and said, "Mom, I just read a sticker on the goalpost and it said, serious death or injury can occur if you climb the goalpost." And I'm going to give you a minute to think about that because it takes a second. Serious death or injury. And I said, "Are you sure that's what it said?" She goes, "Yeah, Mom, that's what it said. It doesn't make any sense, does it?" And she laughed and she ran away. So I walked over to the goalpost and I took a look at it. And sure enough, that's what the goalpost said. Serious death or injury. So, but I was really proud of her because even though she was supposed to be playing soccer, she was spending some time reading the goalpost and using her foundational education to make critical assessments of what she was seeing in her environment. And so, she used her foundational knowledge and analytical thinking and noticed that there was something that didn't make a heck of a lot of sense in her environment. And I was really proud of her for that. And, believe it or not, she does not play soccer anymore, which I think is not that surprising since she was spending her time on the soccer field reading disclaimers on goalposts. But at the end of the day, I would suggest you do the same thing. You learn about technology, you educate yourself about it, and then you make judgments using the information and the education you've obtained, and you think critically about how you're going to implement this tech in your practice. And so at the end of the day, I strongly recommend that you make it part of your day-to-day learnings, and you're going to find that when you implement technology using your foundational knowledge and strategically, you're going to find that it's going to make your day-to-day a lot more productive and streamlined, and you're going to save a lot of time at the end after you've done this upfront research and foundational knowledge. So with that, I will take any questions that you have, and I really appreciate your listening.
Niki, thank you so much for a really terrific presentation. I want to give everybody a little bit of time to post your questions right in the chat box. You can pull up the chat box, write them in, and then I will relay them all to Niki. And while we're waiting, I have a question about the most cost-effective way to maybe go about some of these things. So I was, thinking about the billing software. And how bill for time you can integrate with your matters, but if you're using law practice management software, it's already in there. And I was just wondering what your suggestions are about how to go about really kind of streamlining your practice with tech, but doing it in a cost-effective way.
Well, so when it comes to law practice management software and your approach to using software in your practice, you need to, and streamlining tech. One thing you need to think about is, do you want an all-in-one, or do you want to be able to use these different integrations that will integrate and tap into whatever software you're using to run your practice? And what does that mean if you start using all these different integrations? And one thing that it does do is it adds up in terms of price, which is what you're asking me about. Once you start using multiple integrations, you're paying for each of those software products and then integrating them into the whatever software product you're using to run your practice or handle billing in your practice for that matter. Or document management software also has all sorts of integrations depending on which product you are using. But those different integration costs add up. And the other thing you have to think about is the security. I sort of referenced briefly, but you have to vet every single one of those integration providers in addition to the primary software provider. So not only does it add up and become more expensive, it becomes more time consuming to regularly, most of the opinions recommend it probably once a year or so, going back to all of your software providers, making sure that all of the ways that they're handling your software that they told you about before and your firm's information is still true, so that all of the security measures they have in place have not changed. So the more integrations you have, the more work you have on that end, and oftentimes the more expensive it can be. But sometimes that added expense provides you with a way to customize your practice in a way that you need. So there's trade-offs, and at the end of the day, it's up to you to make the decision about what matters most for your firm and how you want to balance that.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you another question. So one of the things that we use for scanning is a free tool, Scannable. And I was wondering if you had, any thoughts on that. Basically, when we use it, we can scan something in and it will go right into an Evernote folder, and then we can put it wherever we want. In terms of security, maybe what are some of the risks that we should be paying attention to?
Well, so that's another issue, that anytime any confidential data is shared with a company, you need to vet that company and ensure that you thoroughly understand how they're handling your data. There's a list of 20 plus questions that I have that were originally in my cloud computing book, the one there on the left on the bottom. That was published in 2012. And so since then, I've updated that list of questions. I can provide that. There's a link I can provide you if you'd like, that you can share if you want. But essentially, some of the primary categories that you need to, when you vet a provider, are you understand who has access to your data on that side, the provider side, when and under what circumstances will they access your data. Oftentimes it's when you call in with a question and then they'll go in. You need to understand how they back up your data, both in terms of, are there multiple, how frequent are the backups between two different servers? You should have at least two in two different geographic locations to ensure that your data is always on one server, even if the other falls into the ocean in an earthquake, for example. You want to also make sure that there's power source backups to those servers as well. You want to understand the physical data to get into the buildings that house those servers, the physical security measures that are in place, rather. And you also want to understand, you want to make sure that the data stays in the country. There's a whole, so it doesn't go outside the United States, because then it triggers a whole bunch of different other issues. So at the end of the day, there's a whole list of questions. And again, I can provide those to you if you'd like, where I have a list of integration and financial security of the company. How can you export your data in what format if you decide to leave or switch providers? So there's a whole list of questions you need to do. Ask any provider who handles any of your information, including the scanning providers.
We've got a couple of questions, and I'm not sure that we can really get into it, but about practice management software and the pros and cons of various products out there. I
think I'm not in the best position. I did write an article for the ABA Journal on law practice management software. So if you Google my name, law practice management software, ABA Journal, it will come up. And all the articles I write for them, even though I work for a practice management company, are neutral. Otherwise, they wouldn't be publishing them, and I wouldn't have a long-running column with them. And I go through a bunch of the different features, and of the different providers, and sort of give a broad overview. So that might be a good place to go to, that ABA Journal article on practice management providers, to get a broad overview of that space.
Terrific. That's really an excellent suggestion. Got to thank you from one of the people who put that question out there. One other thing, I was wondering if we would be able to get a PDF of your slides to put up, because we always put up a copy of the recording for anybody who missed it or came in late or had to leave early. And if we had a PDF of the slides, they would be able to see exactly which links to go to for the various information and how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, sure thing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This was really a terrific presentation. I really appreciate your sharing your time and your advice, your expertise with us. Like I said, we will all be able to access this particular recording and a PDF of the slides on our Mass Low Map website shortly. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today and suggest that they mark their calendars, excuse me, for next month's webinar, where we're going to have Amina Morrow talk about how to use storytelling for a better law practice. So thank you everybody for tuning in today and have a terrific afternoon.